Good evening and welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host this evening, Michael Roser, and tonight I have a couple hosts joining me from Black Lotus Productions and the Paranormal News Network. Man, this is going to be a fascinating show. They are experiencers, magnets of the paranormal, and I do believe they have much to share with us, folks. Tonight in the studio, I have Damian Gray and Ralph Torlucci as a partnership. They've started this and continue to research as often as they possibly can. Listen, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm very honored to have both of these guests on the show. As you know, normally we're only doing one at a time. Tonight, I'm really happy to be able to switch it up a little bit and introduce sort of a multi-person conversation. And I think this is going to be interesting. All right, so very quickly, I'm going to read a very short bio on these gentlemen. Ralph Torlucci and Damian Gray are virtual magnets for the paranormal. Having had many ghost encounters as well as UFO and alien experiences, they have created a YouTube channel and a podcast to deal with these subjects. They are paranormal researchers and have fallen down many rabbit holes in their quest to discover hidden truths. Listen, that's as basic as it gets, and I'll be honest with you, I'm happy that they left a lot to discussion because I know these guys have much to share. And without further ado, I'd like to bring them both on. Gentlemen, welcome to the show, Damian and Ralph. How are you today?
Hi, how's it going?
Oh, fantastic, brother. So you guys are out in Arizona. How's the weather been?
Not Arizona, Las Vegas.
I'm sorry, Las Vegas. I apologize.
Yeah, Las Vegas. Actually, it's getting temperate again. It was hot as hell, and it seemed like overnight it just we fell into winter. So now it's getting really chilly. Chilly for here. I mean, I know like
exactly.
that. People are going, you have no idea. I used to live in Minnesota, and he used to live in Maine, and so we know what cold is. But you get used to it here. You get used to the heat, and man, it drops down to 35 degrees, and you're like, oh my God, we're not going to survive.
It's not even freezing, but you're not used to it. And I get that. Believe me, being from Massachusetts, Ralph, if you're from Maine, that's New England as well. The weather patterns are all over the place. So I feel you on that. Let's get into what we came to discuss this evening. I'm very interested in learning about your guys' experiences together and individually. So I'll start off very simple, and I'll start with Damian. Ralph, you can jump in at any time if you like. Otherwise, you can take this part of the segment for yourself. Where did you guys grow up, and where did your interest in this field as a whole, because you guys are very eclectic in the fashion that you cover many different topics under the umbrella, where did this come as a curiosity for you that you wanted to pursue the actual research?
You want me to field this?
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, Ralph and I have been friends. We're both now in our 50s, but we've been friends since I want to say I was 17 and you were like 19, 20 maybe.
Something like that.
And we actually met through the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And he played Frankenfurter, and he got me to play Riff Raff. And so that's how we got to know each other way back then. And, we've been friends pretty much ever since. And so we've always had the paranormal things happen to us. I mean, even back when we were kids. So with that in mind, I told Ralph once, I said, I want to start a podcast, and I want it to be about just anything and everything and all. And I also want to focus on paranormal stuff, UFOs and ghosts and that sort of thing. And he thought it was a good idea. And so we started something called, it was an old podcast / YouTube video called Pop Views. And we had that going for so long, and we had interviews on there, but again, we talked about everything. We talked about everything from UFOs. We had movie reviews. We talked politics, and we found that we were getting the most views when we talked about paranormal stuff. And so I asked Ralph, I said, what do you think that we rebrand and just do a completely different kind of thing? And we'll just do stuff on the strange and unusual. And he says, yeah, it's a great idea. So in the process of rebranding the show on YouTube, I accidentally deleted all of our videos.
Oh,
Boom,
no.
one fell swoop.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was pleasant. And so, but anyway, but we did start up a new channel, and it's called Black Lotus Productions, and it's strictly about the strange and unusual. And while we had that pop view thing going for what, about a year or so?
No, longer than that.
Was it longer than that?
Yeah.
You know, and we only had, I want to say maybe 40 subscribers, something like that. We didn't have much of anything. And, you know, and we've been doing Black Lotus now for the past, 3 years, I guess. Is it 3 years already? 2.5 years, probably.
Yeah. Probably
And
not.
yeah, and we certainly have a hell of a lot more subscribers than that now, you know. And so it was really a fortunate mistake that whole thing got blown up. But anyway, that's how we started the whole Black Lotus thing. And then it was about maybe 6 months ago that we started the Paranormal News Network on Podbean. We're also available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Amazon Music. But what we do there is a little different from what we do at Black Lotus. At Black Lotus, we talk about topics, you know, strange and unusual topics. And we don't generally interview people there. At Paranormal News Network, what we do is we bring the latest in paranormal news to our listeners, as well as have talks with some pretty fascinating people. In fact, you're going to be on our show next week. Yeah, it's really a cool little podcast, and it's taken off pretty well, actually.
Why is it important to intertwine these interviews along with some of the premiere videos that you put out on certain topics? Why do you think that it's so important that we're talking to people about this stuff as well as releasing information through our research?
Well, everybody's curious, and
Yeah.
when we decide to look into something, we go down a lot of rabbit holes, and it's kind of easy to do.
Yeah.
So I think that just comes with it. But you get interested in it, and you want to know, so you look into it.
Yeah. And you know, and for me personally, I'm, you know, some people say they were taken and they had very positive interactions with aliens. I don't feel I was taken or anything. I mean, I was downright abducted against my will. And for me personally, I want people to know that if it's happened to you, you're not alone. And I mean, and I know what it's like to have to keep this bottled up inside for the sake of appearances. You know, I was in restaurant management for the longest time, and I couldn't have my employees knowing that I was abducted. You know, I had to maintain some sort of modicum of respect. And so I know what it's like to have to keep it to yourself or share it with only a couple of people, you know. And it's hard. It's really difficult. I liken it to people coming out of the closet, as it were. Because I mean, it's a very freeing moment when you're able to do something like that, and yeah, just let other people know, you know, you're not alone. It's hard to be in that, you know, UFO closet, but you know, once you come out of it, feels great. You know,
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the ability to help somebody else, you know, through the mediums that we use is something special, I think, because we don't necessarily set out when we sit down with somebody to say, hey, I'm going to help you today. You want them to express their experiences, and then you find the similarities, and perhaps there's something that you've experienced, but there is a healing in this expression, in this talk. I had a guest on named Wreakin' Havoc, who was an alien or is an alien abductee. He's had many experiences since the initial one that he had when he was 14, but they were more on the paranormal end of things, which was interesting. But he decided, after struggling for quite some time, where he was making life decisions based on the tumult that he was going through with these experiences, that he would finally speak out. And I'll tell you what, this was probably 2-3 months ago, and I've kept in touch with him, and he literally looks like a new person today. Skin looks better, brighter eyes, feels more confident. You can see it in the way he sits. He speaks, you know, when he came and began to speak about it to begin with, he was a broken man. He was an absolutely broken and shattered individual, but talking and sharing. And again, like you're saying, realizing there are other people out there who've had these experiences. That's the most important thing I think we can offer as hosts and interviewers in what we're doing, you know. But to get back to what you guys are really up to, it's one thing to be into the paranormal, one thing to be into ufology, another thing to be into cryptozoology. But where did your interest in all these subjects merge at some point? At what point in your life did you decide you wanted to investigate everything under the umbrella and not just one particular aspect of the field?
Well, as I said, paranormal things have happened to us our entire lives, individually and together. And so, like, for instance, there was one situation that happened with, a couple of situations that happened with Ralph and me. Back when we were kids, he was over at my mom's house, and I had to take the garbage out. And so I was taking the garbage out of my living room, or out of the bedroom, and going down the hallway, and there was another hallway off that hallway to go outside. And so he was walking kind of ahead of me, and he somehow didn't realize that we were going out that door down that hallway. And so I turned into that hallway, and he walked directly into our living room. And suddenly he kind of blew himself back against the wall, and he's like, "Oh my God." And I was like, "Uh-oh," because something weird had happened prior to this. And so I said, "What's up?" And he says, "There's some guy sitting in that chair in the living room." And so the reason it freaked me out is because about a year earlier than that, my girlfriend and I were over, and the situation was almost exactly that, where she walked ahead of me into the living room, and she blew herself back and said the same thing. She's like, "Oh my God." And I asked her, I said, "What's up?" And she said, "There's a guy slumped over in that chair in the living room." And my mom had one of those, this is back in the early 80s. She had one of those golden velvet throne chairs kind of thing. And anyway, so she said that there was a guy who was slumped over. He was in a tuxedo. His hair was all slicked back, and he was slumped over on his side, and blood was dripping from his temple. And I thought, okay. So then when this happened a year later with Ralph, I looked at him and I said, "We need to get out of here right now, because I'm kind of freaking out."
Yeah, because I had no idea it happened before.
Yeah. And so we left, and we went to this local grocery store and parked in the parking lot. And I said, "All right, I feel safe here now." Finally, I said, "Tell me what you saw." And he said essentially the same thing. The only difference was that the guy was sitting upright, and he was sitting with his legs crossed. But yeah, so that's something weird that happened between the two of us, But tell them a story about that missing time thing that you and I had.
Oh, yeah, that was one of the strange events. This is why you were asking why we got into this and like all the different types. It's because we've had too many different types of experiences to just concentrate on one.
Yeah. I think the only thing we haven't done is we haven't witnessed a cryptid, like Bigfoot or anything like that.
No cryptids. No.
Still time.
There's still time, of course. I don't think we're going to see many here in the middle of Vegas, though.
We have enough.
Hey, the way it's going, Vegas. You never know. Yeah, exactly.
That's true. It is 2020. Anyhow, we had gone to visit a friend of ours that we knew that was about a 2.5 hour drive from where we lived. We went and spent some time there, and then we were on our way back. And all of a sudden, we're home. Now, we know it takes 2.5 hours to get home, and we're there way quicker, and we don't remember anything about the ride.
Yeah, and the clock in your car was screwed up.
Yeah, and the clock in my car was screwed up. That's right. I forgot about that.
It was really weird. We got in the car. It was nighttime when we left Oceanside, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was nighttime. We got on the freeway, and we weren't really talking. We were listening to the radio, and then all of a sudden, bam, we are back in Claremont, California. And like he said, it's like 2.5 hours away. And it seemed like it only took us about 10 minutes to get there.
Right.
You know,
Very odd.
very strange. Now, I know that a lot of abductees have claimed missing time, but neither one of us can remember anything like that. We just remember just being there. It was very strange.
Sure. Out of curiosity, have you ever considered a regression of sort or some sort of hypnotic recollection?
The abduction experience that that happened with me, I remembered everything that happened naturally. So I've never gone under hypnotherapy. I know a very good one. Her name is Lori McDonald. She's pretty famous in the UFO world. She was on our show, in fact. But what I can remember of the abduction that I have had, at first, when I first started remembering this, it seemed like a relatively innocuous event. It didn't seem frightening at all. It was kind of confusing, but it wasn't frightening. But then it was about maybe almost a year ago, Ralph and I were watching this movie called The Fourth Kind.
Well, tell them about the first part, when you first figured it out.
Well, yeah, I'll get to that. But we were watching this movie together, and it's about this. It's a fictional account about these abductions that were happening in Alaska. And during one of the segments, this woman was recalling her experience while she was lying on a slab on the ship. And up to this point, I had never been able to remember what happened to me while I was on that table. I knew that I couldn't move. And one of the aliens came up to me, and I got the distinct feeling it was female. I don't know why. But she put her hand on my forehead, and I blacked out. And that's all I could remember until after I was off of the table for years and years and years. And like I said, about, it was almost a year ago, we were watching A Fourth Kind. And in that segment, she was describing what was happening to her on the table. And there was a scene with a drill going right toward her eye, this weird looking drill going right toward her eye. And I flipped out. It triggered this memory that I had suppressed for so many years. And so I guess my point is that I don't know. I mean, if there's anything more to remember about the situation I went through, I don't think I want to know, So, yeah, I've thought about.
Sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say, just for clarity, you're talking about a separate event than what you experienced alongside of Ralph.
Right.
Okay, that's wanted to make sure that I was on the right track. Okay, cool.
Yeah. But we haven't gone through any hypnotherapy about that situation either. So, I might be interested in doing that someday, but I don't know about you.
More mystery in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? You never know. Something might come to you in due time. I find it very interesting that a lot of people are triggered by motion pictures. And, Al Bielek, for example, was also triggered off by the Philadelphia Experiment, that terrible movie that came out, I think, in 1981. But, that being said, you hear a lot of this same story along the way where people have had these experiences and don't remember anything. And then they're watching something through cinema and all of a sudden, that's it. That's all it takes. It starts flooding back. And I just think that's very interesting because it seems like such a benign source to get triggered from. You know what I mean? Such an unintentional source, but yet it's there. Human mind is very interesting.
Well, yeah. And that's what happened with me when I remembered my abduction. My abduction happened back in 1988. I didn't remember any of it until 1995, when one night I had a good friend of mine by the name of Clay. And he was over at the house. And, up to this point, I had never really believed in UFOs. I believed in extraterrestrial life because, how can you not in this vast universe? I mean, obviously there's other life out there, whether it's more advanced than us or not, but I just thought that if it's more advanced than us, then why would they bother coming here? I mean, and dealing with virtual cavemen, and so I thought, I just don't buy it. Well, anyway, Clay was a huge proponent of UFOs and extraterrestrials and stuff. And he brought with him that night, he brought over a companion book for the X-Files. And so I'm kind of flipping through it, and he's talking to me, yes, they do exist, and blah, 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 on and on and on. And anyway, I came upon this one still from the series, and it was I think it was of Fox Mulder, and he's pointing up to the sky, and over him is a triangular ship with lights at each point. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very large, but anyway, yeah. So at that point, I blacked out. I fainted, but I didn't faint like people normally faint. According to my girlfriend at the time and Clay, who were with me, I kind of just like zoned out. You know, I wasn't even blinking. And I immediately, all these memories flooded back to me in a period of about maybe 5 minutes. And when I came to, when they finally got me to come to, I said, "That's it. That's the ship, but it's not it. It's much larger than that." And so, because the one I saw was roughly about the size of a football field, and it was a great big black triangle, and it had those 3 lights, and it also had these squiggly colored lights that would snake on the underside of it. And I would say it was about the size of a 2-story building. But anyway, yeah. So, I mean, you were talking about how media can trigger it. You know, just that one picture is what brought back all those memories.
It's absolutely fascinating, you know, when that sort of thing occurs. And, you know, at that point, once that door opens up, you just start having more and more questions that, I mean, for most people, they can't stop asking because they've seen just enough to know that what they've looked at and what they believed in terms of reality isn't exactly as it's been. There's been something more there. Do you believe that there are, you know, both benevolent and non-benevolent entities in the universe, extraterrestrials? Do you think that they might be working with us in a parent sort of sense where we share DNA with them, and yet we still have an opposite side of a species that would rather see us perish than, you know, bolster us? Where do you guys stand on extraterrestrial interaction and what they might be actually doing here in terms of intention?
I think that there's both good and bad. I mean, there's good and bad here on Earth, so I would believe out in our universe is probably a little bit of both too, good and bad.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings about the Greys. I more tend to believe that the Greys, as we know them, are more like bio drones that work for another alien species, say like the tall whites, you know. And so I can't really say that they're evil, but what they're doing to people when they abduct them it's nothing nice. On the other hand, you have species like the Pleiadians, and they've been shown to work with human beings and want to better us, you know, some way, make us evolve, you know. While I think perhaps the Draconians, the reptilians, they are probably not benevolent creatures, in my opinion, just from what I've researched about them.
Sure, of course. What percentage do you think might reside on the Earth, or off planet, or interdimensionally, or a combination of both?
I think it's a combination. I really do. I don't know about you.
A combination too. I mean, it can't all be one thing.
Right.
There's too many different types out there. And even I think, like you're saying, you know, the Greys are probably not good, but there might be good Greys and bad Greys even.
That's very possible.
We don't know.
You know, especially if they are in fact bio drones, you know, I mean, just robots that are living basically. And so if that's a case, they could be being used by several different species.
True.
You know, and depending on how that species views humanity, that's how we'll perceive them, you know.
No, it's a very good point. And that's a theory that's been coming to light a lot more lately, that they might actually be something biomechanical. the androgynous nature of these little beings, and yet they come in different sizes. So there might be a subspecies within a species controlling, their creation, their satellites, so to speak. So, I mean, that's interesting. And I honestly didn't know that we were going to take this course with the aliens and everything, but this is perfect. What do you think, or let me put it this way. Do you think that extraterrestrial phenomenon intertwines with paranormal phenomenon here on Earth? And is there an immediate connection in any way? Ralph, why don't you take this one away?
I really don't think that they're connected. I think that they're separate. Except for maybe future or cross interdimensional animals, or like Bigfoot is possibly interdimensional. So if aliens are too, possibly, then I guess they are kind of connected. But
yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, we're talking about UFOs, and people always say, well, some of the skeptics will say, well, if they live in a different part of the galaxy, do you realize how long it would take them to get here? And I'm thinking, well, no, not necessarily. If they are interdimensional, if they've perfected these UFO crafts to be interdimensional, then perhaps they've found a way to bend space and time, to get here. So yeah, in a way, I think that all aliens are probably interdimensional in some sense or another. We wanted to come on the show and talk a little bit about the Hat Man and shadow people. And it's been suggested to us that they are actually interdimensional beings, and that they're not spirits or ghosts or anything like that, but they're interdimensional beings. Some people we've talked to claim that they're demons, and I'm not so sure about that. But we have one living here with us, as it were.
Haven't seen him in a while.
Not in a while.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't seen him in about I want to say it's been months. Yeah, but yeah,
he sits and one special part of the hallway is usually where he's at, and it's one of those where you see him out of the corner of your eye every once in a while.
Yeah, and Ralph and my wife and I have all seen it. And but yeah, you just like he said, you catch it out of the corner of your eye, and it's there for a second and it's gone. But
so we also have go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I say we also have a spirit cat that lives here with us. We have a real cat too, but you'll hear meowing, and then you'll look up, and our cat is sleeping on the couch. The cat that lives here, or you'll hear. You'll feel like a cat's rubbed against your leg. You know how they like to rub against your legs? You'll feel that, and you'll look down, and there's nothing there. And again, the cat's asleep somewhere on the couch or in the other part of the room or the house.
Thing almost killed me once. I was walking up, we have our studio in the house, and I was walking past the studio, and there have been times when I've caught the cat being there. It's just this dark shadow of a cat, like a silhouette. But again, it's gone there 1 second, it's gone the next. But anyway, I was walking past the studio, the door was open, and all of a sudden I hear this, and the thing darted out in front of me and almost made me trip and break my ass. I'm like, you damn cat. I thought it was our own cat. I thought it was our real cat. And I said, you damn cat. And I looked up, and again, like he said, the cat's sound asleep on the couch. And even
that's so funny.
My wife heard it. They were sitting in the living room. They heard it happen. Yeah. So, God.
It's
we
odd,
don't have problems with either one of them, really.
Well, it's odd. I mean, because you think, that something ethereal like that wouldn't startle you to such a degree that you might have such a physical reaction. But I've actually had a similar experience with a young boy who just darted in front of me. I thought it was my son, and it wasn't. It was something else. But I physically kind of reacted to it because I almost ran into him at one point. And that's just, it's interesting, the nature of these things. What makes you think that what you have in the house is a shadow man and not just maybe a disembodied spirit or somebody who's crossed over? Is there any behavior that you're noticing or observing that points to a more preternatural existence in a sense?
Well, no. I think the reason, because like I said, we don't have issues with the cat or this shadow person. They don't do normal haunting kind of things. I mean, like there was one instance that I was in the kitchen and I was unloading the dishwasher, and above the dishwasher, but kind of out of reach, is where we keep the coffee maker, and we keep my wife and I keep a spoon in a little glass cup there to stir sugar and whatever. And anyway, so I'm unloading the dishwasher and I'm not really doing anything to have had caused this, but suddenly the spoon flipped up out of that glass container and fell on the counter and down on the floor. And I mean, when I was unloading the dishwasher, I wasn't creating enough vibration to have that happen because it just flipped straight up in the air, But so we had that happen. But we really don't have a lot of like what people would call haunting or or poltergeist activity here. But yeah, and there was one situation before Ralph came to live with my wife and I, and my wife's daughter, my stepdaughter, was over here with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend brought over his 3-year-old little girl, and we were all having dinner together. Well, and so we're sitting in the dining room, and from the dining room, you can see our front door to the house. And the little girl kept, as we're sitting there eating, she kept looking over toward the front door. And finally I said to her, I said, "Sweetie, what do you see over there?" And she said, "There's a man over there." And I said, "Oh, here we go again." Right. And I told her, I told her, I said, or I asked her, I said, "Well, what's he doing?" She said, "He's not doing anything. He's just standing there and smiling." I thought, and so I told her, I said, "Do me a favor and close your eyes for a minute and tell me, when you reopen your eyes, tell me if you can still see him." And she did. And she opened her eyes and says, "No, he's not there anymore." But I asked her what he looked like. And she said he was wearing a hat and he had a suit on. Well, and so at the time, I didn't know anything about the Hat Man. It was before we got into all this, And so, but I later found out that people who see the Hat Man distinctly see him. It's not a shadow of somebody. They distinctly see him, and we're usually wearing a hat, sometimes and a suit, and sometimes he wears a gold pocket watch kind of thing. But people can definitely see the outline of him and see what he looks like, and he's usually smiling. And so I kind of wonder, and so shadow people are often associated with him. And some people, like they said, think that they are interdimensional beings, and that much like those bio drone grays, they're working for him, these shadow people. And I don't know if they're just like observing for him or what they're doing. But yeah, the thing that we have in our hallway, I call it a shadow person. I'm not sure really what it is, but it seems to me to be a shadow person. Just from, the research I've done on this stuff, it seems to be that.
Why do you think that it has a connection with the gray aliens in respect to some sort of command and control?
Oh, I don't think that the gray aliens have anything to do with shadow people. No, what I'm saying is that the shadow people possibly work for the Hat Man.
Okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood what you said. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So
that would make sense. Do you think that the Shadow Man and shadow people, let's say shadow people in general, do you think that there's any distinction between the separate entities, or do you think that they're more of a collective, as in the sense of a legion?
Yeah, I think that that's exactly it. I think putting it as legion is pretty correct. I think they're all part of one thing. I just happen to think that the Hat Man probably leads it up somehow.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's always a leader somewhere. I've seen that even in paranormal investigations where I've come up against very old and ancient energies. They had their little army of shadow figures around them as well, and they would usually show up before the big one did. So I definitely understand how that happens. Now, do you guys actually go out into the field and do physical paranormal
No.
research? No,
We would
nothing
love
like that?
to, but no.
Yeah, no, we don't. I think maybe eventually we will. We're continuing to talk about putting a book together, collaborating on a book, describing our various experiences with all this stuff. But yeah, I would love to go out in the field and research. And here in Las Vegas, there's a lot of haunting stuff that goes on here. I mean, a lot of the casinos are haunted. But even off the strip, there are a lot of places that are purportedly haunted, saloons and old ghost towns and that kind of stuff. And so eventually we'll do it, I think, but not right now.
Well, I understand that. I mean, of course, you guys have seen many investigations on television and, through you and other media as well. I would like to ask you this question because there seems to be a dividing opinion on this at large. How do you feel about investigating the paranormal in your own home, in your own space? It's been mentioned in doing so, it's possible that you may open up communication with something you may rather not have, and that because it's in your personal space, it might be more difficult to get rid of. What do you guys think about that?
You know what? It depends on how you're doing it. First of all, I don't recommend calling things in. If it was just a normal investigation, I think I'd be okay with that. If it's something like if you're using Ouija boards and trying to connect with people and stuff in your own home, no, I wouldn't do it. I've had a bad experience with the Ouija board, and I don't recommend the Ouija board being used by anybody from me.
Well,
personally,
Ralph,
I don't have.
Let me ask you this question. Okay, I want to move on to you in just a moment, Damian. But you really brought up a great point, bringing up the Ouija boards here. Why do you think that so many people have negative experiences with the Ouija board specifically? Because let's be honest, there are many different ways that you can contact spirits. Maybe even using power objects, pendulums, and so forth, dowsing rods, you name it. There's so many different ways. Why would it be different for a Ouija board than perhaps using a crystal ball? Let's say, what's the difference?
A crystal ball, you're looking into it and you're seeing images. A Ouija board, you're pulling up spirits. You're not just looking into the things, you're pulling up spirits and talking to them.
Well, aren't you doing the same thing with a pendulum as well? Go ahead, Damian.
Let me further clarify that. I read tarot, for instance, and when you're dealing with divination like that, you're dealing with your own mind and what these images on these cards mean to you. It's almost like dream interpretation. When you're dealing with something like a Ouija board, evidently, or even with a pendulum, again, evidently, you're directing, you're in contact with a spirit itself. You're not really in contact with the spirit when you're dealing with Ouija with tarot or runes or anything like that. Again, it's just a matter of interpretation. Now with a Ouija board and a pendulum and things like that, where you're in constant contact with an actual spirit or an entity or something of some sort. Personally, I don't have a problem with Ouija boards. I think they're beautiful to look at, really. But, I do realize that it's an easy way for lower spirits to get in contact with you and kind of screw up your life. And so getting back to your question about, do you think it's a good idea to investigate your own home if you're having... I wouldn't do it personally, and I think that one of the reasons that people have problems with things like Ouija boards is because they don't know what they're doing with them. And, oftentimes they're teenagers that just, let's just see what happens, that kind of thing. And you're inviting trouble if you're doing that, and so,
Which is exactly what happened to me.
Yeah.
Ralph, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the Ouija board? I mean, tell us as much as you want. I understand if it's negative, you go as far as you like, man, whatever.
No, it's okay. I was in high school when this happened. We were all sitting around playing with a Ouija board, supposedly talking to a spirit. And we were having a party that night at a friend's house. And we said we were going to call him up again, the spirit up again at the party. And the spirit told us, don't do it. Well, us being teenagers and not listening to anybody, we brought the Ouija board with us to the party. And one of my friends had actually gone and gotten some graveyard dust or graveyard dirt.
Jesus.
And so we were going to do this, have another conversation with this ghost again. And as we're getting ready to talk to this ghost, all of a sudden they had this patio that was enclosed with plexiglass like type windows, that really thick plastic. And all of them at the same time bowed in and bowed out. And it's like a football team was like pushing every window at the same time. And that's it. That's all that happened. But that was enough to make us saying, maybe we shouldn't be doing this.
You know, you're right. And we hear hundreds of stories like this. And usually it's around the Thanksgiving table where, you know, Aunt May decides to indulge something from her college years. And that's it, though. They get spooked. Maybe they don't close the session, but generally people don't, by and large, have issues after. However, there are some people who it follows, and it follows them throughout their childhood into adulthood and sometimes disrupts their lives. Personally, I've been told, and this is something I've experimented with a little bit, that when you go and get an actual Ouija board, I don't remember if it was Milton Bradley, I think it was, that created them. You can correct me if I'm wrong with that. When they first came out, they were marketed, as you said, it's just a game. People don't really understand it, but it's something that was fabricated by somebody else with different energy and a different intention behind what it actually is. If you are to go and cut out your own piece of paper, line up the letters and draw things out, get like a glass or something, make your own, what the hell's the word? Planchette. Thank you. Planchette. Then that's more of imbuing your energy into that creation. Therefore, you will be able to reach more higher vibrational beings rather than the lower. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally possible. I have to agree.
Yeah.
One of the things too that you asked before, what got us into this, and like I said, we've had so many different types of things, as you're starting to see now, happen to us, which we have, there's still a lot more stuff that's happened to us. But when you start having that much stuff happen to you, you have to look into it and find out what's going on. And I think with our channel and stuff, we are able to do that because we find interesting stuff and just go and investigate it.
Yeah. For instance, what was that thing I was telling you? I told you we should do a show on that. I can't remember what it was. It's going to be on our upcoming program.
The guy that would want to have sex with a Bigfoot.
Oh, that he lived with Bigfoot. Yeah, we come across stories like that, and what the story is, it's about this miner from way back when, and he purportedly lived with a family of Sasquatch for several years, I guess. And so anyway, we'll see a story like that, and we'll throw it to each other and go, we need to look into this. We need to do a Black Lotus episode on this, and so. And we have a group at Facebook called the Black Lotus Discussion Group, and we share a lot of articles there about the paranormal, everything under the paranormal umbrella. But Ralph and I, not only having had a lot of experiences together and alone, I think we've always been interested in the paranormal. Like I said, I never really believed in UFOs. I believed in extraterrestrial life, but I did believe in ghosts because I've had a lot of ghost encounters, and so I remember when I was a kid, there was something on with Leonard Nimoy, and it was called In Search Of. And when I was a kid, I used to like watching that, so I've always been attracted to the paranormal. I think you're probably in the same boat with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Having stuff happen to me, seeing like UFOs. When very first time I saw a UFO, I was about 8 years old. I saw a big shiny kind of like the Goodyear blimp type shape, but without the basket on the bottom.
Okay, I can picture that.
Like what do they call them now? Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was 8 years old when I saw this, and I saw it up close. It wasn't, it was like down low.
Well, and you had another experience later on when you lived in Claremont.
Oh,
where
yeah.
You saw that kind of a V formation.
When I was living in Claremont, we were having a what do you call it? Block party. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word there. We were having a block party, and it was just starting to get dark out, and everybody was cleaning up, and so we're all out. We lived in a cul-de-sac, so we were able to block it off and all have pull-out tables in the middle of the street and stuff. So we're starting to clean up from this, and we noticed 5 red lights up in the sky, kind of moving around over the mountains, and then all of a sudden, the 5 red lights formed into a V. And just came zooming down and just swept over a street and took off and disappeared down the street. We actually reported that. I don't remember who we reported it to, but we did report seeing it. And there was a lot of people. There was at least 20 people there that saw it happen. So
did it make any noise that you heard?
No noise.
Nothing at all. No. If it as it moved, no change in the environment, no wind or anything like that.
Nope, just the sight. No noise at all.
Very weird. Southern California.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention Southern California is really a big hotspot for UFOs. I mean, there's a lot of reports that come out of there, and especially in the areas where we were from there. I lived in Alta Loma. He lived in Claremont. That whole Inland Valley area is just rife with UFO reports, and that's actually where my abduction occurred, was in that area, in the desert area there.
There are hotspots for these sightings and activity. I think Lake Erie is another one, if I'm not mistaken about that. But that's interesting. I'll be honest with you, I can't remember what the hell I was going to ask you. It'll come back. it'll come back. How many UFO experiences have you had in total, individually? I mean, some people only have 1 or 2. How many do you think you've seen? And I do remember the question now. I'm just going to add this on the end. How many, or how much of what we see in the sky do you think is actually attributed to extraterrestrials or our own work?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, first
I'm going to
of all,
grab a coffee. I'll be back. Okay. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
First of all, how many UFO things have you experienced?
Oh,
that you know of?
3.
Three.
If I can think of. Yeah.
I don't know personally. Off the top of my head, I would say probably about 7, 8, maybe more. Here in Las Vegas is another hotspot for UFOs. We have Nellis Air Force Base here, and we have that Area 51 and S4 not too far away from us as the crow flies. Actually, you can drive there inside of 3 hours, and so we see a lot of weird stuff here. There was one incident where Ralph and my wife and I were all out on our back patio, and we have on one side of us, we have the flight path from McCarran Airport, and on the other side of us, we have the flight path from Las Vegas Airport. So we see planes flying all the time.
And then you have the Janet ones.
Janet Airlines, and I'm not sure if you or your listeners know what this is, but Janet Airlines is the airline that they use to take people in and out of places like Nellis Air Force Base and S4 and Area 51. And so, I mean, when I say employees, I mean all kinds of employees, everything from scientists to janitors. And so, but that's how they get in and out. But anyway, that airline crosses over our house, I would say a good 6 to 8 times a day. And so anyway, getting back to the story, Ralph and my wife and I were sitting out there and we're just chatting. And, my wife and I used to smoke. And so we would go out there occasionally smoke. And so Ralph happened to look up and he said, "Oh, there's Janet again." And I looked up and suddenly I saw something that was kind of behind it, but lower. And I was like, "What the hell is that?" And it was just moving really slow, but it was a silvery cigar shaped object.
Mhm.
And I mean, I've seen videos of these things before and it looked exactly like that. But this one was a little different though, because it had like this black orb that was circumventing the circumference of the thing. And again, it was moving very slow. And the first thing I thought was, oh, well, it's just a balloon. But the more we watched it, the more we're going, that's no balloon. You know, it couldn't possibly be a balloon. Well, the funny thing about this is that Ralph was out there with his tablet. My wife was out there with her smartphone. I ran back in the house to grab my video camera, and I came back out there, and not one of us could get this thing in frame. It was almost like it was cloaked to the digital stuff. But with the naked eye, you could see it plainly, you know. But we watched it for
a while.
Yeah, about 10 minutes or so as it slowly passed over our house and then just faded off into the distance.
So as you held up your phone or whatever camera you're using, when you were looking through the viewfinder or on the screen, what did it look like? It just would stay out of focus? You just couldn't see it?
Just couldn't see it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you could hold the camera up like this and then move it away, and there it is. But you move the camera in, and you can't see it anymore. It was like I said, it was like it was cloaked. And again, this is broad daylight. You know, this is sometime in the afternoon.
Right.
You know,
how long did that sighting last?
Like I said, about 10 minutes. We watched it for about 10 minutes.
I'm sorry, 10 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and then it just got so far out into the distance, we couldn't see it anymore. You know, it wasn't those typical UFO things where suddenly it flashed away or something like that. It wasn't like that. It was just
kept on going.
Just kept on going. Yeah. Yeah, it was the weirdest thing. And I'm really sorry that not one of us could get this thing on film, because it would have been a remarkable video, I think, you know, but yeah.
Well, again, you do hear stuff like this a lot. I mean, there's many instances where there were two people involved. One person could see what was going on in the sky. The other person says, "I don't see what you're looking at." And they're standing right side by side. And the person who can see the event occurring is sure that whoever's standing around could absolutely see this the same way that he does. And yet his friend doesn't see it. It has to be some sort of market perception. And then I'm not sure how that influence actually works, but there are plenty of very subtle energies that we're just sort of touching upon and figuring out for ourselves, at least in the general sense for the population. You know, I think there are people obviously in governmental bodies who've been playing with these things for a very long time, but they're not going to tell us anything, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I once heard somebody say who was in top government, he said, or he was like a scientist for the government. And he says, you know, there are more things in the skies of Nevada than you can dream of. And he said, imagine Star Trek. We're at that point. We were at that point years ago. Now we're even further on with it. So, you know, you were asking how much of it is like alien and how much of it is human. I can't answer that, because I mean, we've seen weird things in the sky. Well, I have personally, I've seen some weird things in the skies here in Nevada that I just can't explain. And like I say, we have these two airport traffic areas. We know what planes look like. We know what helicopters look like. We even know what drones look like. It's not that hard, but I mean, I've seen things here that I just can't explain. Whether they're alien or not, I have no idea. But given that we are so close to like things like S4 and Area 51, where they continually run secret flights of things, it could be just that. It could be just alien technology that or a technology that we've either developed on our own or retrieved it from backward engineering alien spacecraft. But I think that a lot of what people are seeing here are probably man-made, but developed from alien technology.
That's exactly what I would say too. I think a lot of what we're seeing in our skies are those particular people playing around with that technology. And yeah, I do think that they might be as brazen as to just throw it in the sky in the middle of the day, because they know people down below don't know what the hell they're looking at. And they may even call it something else. Yeah, well,
Everybody's looking at
that's
those. I tell people, people say, "Oh, I want to see a UFO," and it's like, you know what? Come to Vegas and look up. That's pretty much all you need to do most of the time.
No, that's very curious, man. It's really interesting to hear people's accounts of these different vehicles that are in the sky. But back in, let's see, I remember the late 80s, early 90s, I was watching videos of people out in the backcountry here in the United States, and they were building these spacecrafts out of, or at least flying crafts out of back engineered blueprints that they had gotten somewhere. I know the government did release a handful of these sometime in the early 2000s. I mean, to no real end. I don't think anybody's really done much with it, but you hear about these people with these backyard projects. Who really knows what we've been able to do in terms of this technology? I mean, you study Tesla's work long enough, you get something out of that you originally did not set out to discover in relation to the esoteric nature of his work, and not just the electricity part of that as well. In terms of the paranormal, and you're walking around every day, even as a paranormal investigator or somebody who would like to do this, what do you guys think about protection, personal protection from outside influence that might be negative?
I think it's extremely important. And again, I think that's one of the reasons that people have had so many bad experiences with things like Ouija boards, is because they don't protect themselves. They just jump into it and say, well, let's see what happens. I wouldn't call, well, I know Ralph and I are, neither one of us are religious people. I think I believe in God more than he does, but I believe in a different kind of God. It's not what most people think of as God. But I do believe that because there is a God, there are also negative energies out there. And I wouldn't call them devils or demons necessarily, but all things, it's like the yin and the yang. All things have an equal and opposite.
Yep. Positive and negative.
Right. And so, yeah, I think if there's good things out there, there are most certainly bad things. And when you're talking about entities or spirits, that is most certainly the case. I think there are some out there that are really good and appear to you when you're in times of trouble and kind of try to help you through it. Such as, maybe past relatives or something like that. My mother, for instance, is passed, but I can feel her sometimes when I'm in a really bad space. And it's kind of comforting, which is weird because my mother and I didn't get along that well. But, but then, I'm particularly sensitive to this kind of stuff. And I think that that's why I've had so many ghost encounters, and because I can sense them. I don't necessarily see them, but I can feel them. I think that there are good and bad entities out there. And I think it's very important that you protect yourself when you do things like that, whether it's an investigation or dealing with things like divination or anything like that.
And the good and the bad energies is you're never going to know which one you really have.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because the bad ones could definitely seem good at first and then turn out to be bad.
Right. It's like you were saying about, creating your own Ouija board and putting your own personal energy into it. I think that if you're going to do something like that, then you should surround yourself with light, and you should, say out loud, only positive energies are allowed in this room. And so negative energies can get the hell out, And so, yeah, but I think that's extremely important.
What about you, Ralph? What's your take on that? And if you do think that protection is something necessary, what would you do to protect yourself?
I don't know if protection is what I would think of. I would think of more just being careful.
Being positive, maybe.
And being positive, definitely. Yeah. But being careful too, not playing with the Ouija board and playing with things that you don't know about sometimes is not a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
but I think that that's something that is paranormal investigators have to realize. before they go out into investigations. I think that most of them probably know to protect themselves, most of them.
I mean, how long did I keep that stupid dummy head?
Oh my God.
And
tell them that story.
And
my God.
Talking about
let's
protection.
hear this one.
Oh man, I hated that thing.
I had a ventriloquist dummy head that I had from when I was a kid, and this thing was spooky, I guess, if it was the best way you could call it. I had it sitting in my room on a pylon, one of those long, thin ones that they put in the roads when they're doing road work. Mm-hmm. And the neck just fit perfectly inside of it. So we'd be sitting in the room, and some of my friends, like I said, didn't like how spooky looking it was. So they turned the head so it was facing the wall, and we'd go about our business. We were all it's across the room now, so everybody's not paying attention to it, and all of a sudden you look over and the thing's staring at you again.
That's disconcerting, to say the least.
Yeah,
our friend Kat said it growled at her once.
Yeah, Kat said it growled at her once. Nobody liked this dummy head, and I kept it for years. I mean, I had it probably till about 3 years ago.
I told him he couldn't bring it here.
Nobody wants that headed around. I keep telling Kat that when I die, I'm leaving it to her in my will.
that house that you lived in, at your mom's house, I mean, that place was creepy as hell. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that happened.
Oh yeah, there was a lady in white that used to go be around and out there. She was just nothing. She was just a spirit. She didn't cause any problems. There was something though that was like a poltergeist, because one time my ring got stolen and I couldn't find my ring anywhere. And all of a sudden it appeared months later in the middle of the living room floor. Now we know we've vacuumed and been in that room and stuff, but all of a sudden there it was in the middle of the floor. So you tell me what took it.
Tell them about that can of mousse.
Yeah,
that was poltergeist activity.
A lot of stuff happened in this house. I was going to take a shower, and it was one of those. It's one of those where the vanity is in one room, and then you got the toilet and the shower in the next room over. And I was getting ready to go take my shower, and I almost knocked the can of mousse onto the floor. So I picked it up and I put it up towards the mirror more so I wouldn't hit it and knock it over. So then I go in to take my shower, and I'm sitting there showering, and all of a sudden this can of mousse comes flying in and hits the wall that's in front of the shower. Okay. Now I'm in the shower, locked, inside a bathroom by myself. How does that happen?
Weird stuff.
I mean, there's no real logical explanation I can come up with at the moment. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah. That house was very haunted,
Yeah, well, there was a time with Kat, another time with Kat too. This is where I think the lady in white comes in, because I don't think the one who threw the moose, I don't think that was the same one as the lady in white. I think that was a different person or a different spirit. But one time my friend Kat was at the house visiting, and she was sitting in the living room, and we had this big painting that was glass fronted hanging on the fireplace. And something, for some reason, happened. The painting just fell straight down and hit the fireplace, and the glass flew everywhere, except for a small circle right where Kat was standing. It was like she had a shield around her, and not any glass got into that area. So I blame the lady in white on that for doing something.
Yeah, normally I would say, well, that could be explained away because of natural things, that it just happened to crash in a certain way. But with everything else that happened at that house, I don't know about that. I just weird stuff. But, I had an interesting ghost experience. Yep. Yeah, I just want to throw that out
before
there.
Damian.
Yeah.
before you get into that, let me just ask you guys a question. Why do you think there's such a focus on the negative experiences in the paranormal world in respect to, some of the ghost investigations and, ghost adventures and so forth? Everybody wants to go to that really evil spot. Why aren't they looking for more friendly, more uplifting ghosts? What's the fixation on the negativity?
Well,
it sells.
because it sells. It sells. It really does. You see these TV shows where they're doing paranormal investigations, and I know a paranormal investigator, and I said, "Is it really like that?" And he says, "No." He says it's a lot of hurry up and wait. He says it's really a boring job, and he said, some of these shows out there where they're jumping at every sound, they're doing that to sensationalize the show because, he said it's really boring actually, but I think that there are a lot of positive spirits out there. But I have a feeling that spirits are often frustrated and they're not doing things to intentionally scare people, but they want their presence known, and they want people to acknowledge them. I think a lot of them haven't realized that they crossed over and they're very frustrated. And so I think that that's why you see a lot of this like poltergeist activity.
Well, that's a very good point. I've heard that it takes a little time for somebody to learn to manipulate the physical after they've crossed over. Each person is a little bit different in length of time, but eventually the majority of them do figure out how to manipulate reality. That would make sense too, because if it scares you, a cup falls off the counter and smashes. I mean, that's sort of a destructive way it looks, and it might seem like poltergeist activity, but it might just be somebody trying to make contact and not realizing the method that they're using. You know what I'm saying? It could scare, somebody else, or they don't realize that in between reality that they're actually living in at that time.
Yeah.
That's interesting, man.
On the other hand,
I'm sorry, you were gonna say something.
Well,
yeah.
I think that explains away a lot of poltergeist activity. However, I don't think that it explains away hauntings, and hauntings are a totally different animal, as it were. When I lived in Minnesota, when I first moved to Minnesota, I moved in with my then girlfriend, nay, later on became my wife. And I moved in with her at her apartment. And where this apartment was, it was actually a 2-story house, and that had been converted into 3 individual apartments. There was 2 upstairs, and then we had the entire, what they called garden view apartment, which was really a fancy name for a refurbished basement. And it's hard to describe this house and how it worked, because you came in the front door and went downstairs to get to our apartment. And then on the other side of those stairs was a shared laundry room where all 3 apartments shared this one laundry room. And so I preclude this story with that, so you kind of understand what's going on. Anyway, so one night, shortly after I got there, I want to say it was probably only a few days after I got there, she and I were sitting in the living room and we were watching TV. And next to the front door to the apartment was this like coat closet. And inside the coat closet, there was a cubby hole. And it was sealed off. There was a door to the cubby hole. Anyway, so we're sitting there watching television, and I'm hearing this scratching coming from over there. And I'm going, what the hell is that? And so I got up and I went over closer and it stopped. And Rachel, my girlfriend, says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Didn't you hear that scratching?" I said, "Do we have rats?" She goes, "No, we don't have rats." So I went back and sat down, and then she looks at me and says, "That's a little boy that lives in our closet." I said, "What?" She says, "Yeah, we have a ghost of a little boy that lives in that closet, and occasionally he'll scratch on that cubbyhole door." I was like, "You couldn't tell me this before I moved in with you?" I said, "I don't do well with this kind of stuff, And so anyway, so yeah, and you would just hear that scratching occasionally. One day when we were walking into the door, do you remember that old electronic game called You Don't Know Jack?
Oh,
You
Jack.
still with me? Oh yeah.
Did I catch all that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
a little electronic game. And
Is
it
that
was
what you
called
said?
You
Oh,
Don't Know
Jack?
Jack. You Don't Know Jack. And it was a trivia game.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And so anyway, so we were walking in one day, and evidently she had this game up inside that closet and up on the shelf. And so we walked in. As soon as we walked in, the thing went off and it goes, "You don't know Jack." And I said, What's going on with that? She says, the weird thing about that is I took the batteries out. And I said, "You gotta be kidding."
Oh,
So
wow.
I said, "No, I don't believe you." And so I got in there and took the thing out, and lo and behold, no batteries in the thing. There was another instance there. I was home alone, and I was vacuuming backwards out from one of the bedrooms, and I suddenly felt this chill, and then I felt a hand on my right shoulder, and I whipped around because, like I said, nobody else is in the house with me. I whipped around, and there was this black mist that was behind me, and it just disappeared. It just dissipated. So I thought, Jesus, in that laundry room across from our apartment, it was always kind of dark in there. It was like there was like one light bulb in there, and it was kind of dark and dingy. And you could see the piping from the house on the ceiling of this place. And so one day I'm in there and I'm putting the laundry into the dryer, and I catch sight out of the corner of my eye of somebody hanging from the rafters, from those pipes. And I looked and I saw it clear as day. It was a guy, kind of a large guy, and he was hanging from a noose, and then he just disappeared. So anyway, to make a long story even longer, I went to this was in Bloomington, Minnesota, and I went to the Bloomington town hall, and I looked up the address, and evidently it was the site of a double murder suicide. And what had happened is that the guy shot his wife in bed, and then the kid, they think, got scared and went into this cubby hole because that's where he would always go to be punished, apparently. And so he went into the cubby hole. The guy went in there, shot him too, and then turned around and hung himself in that basement. And so, yeah, very strange. I was very happy to leave that place because that place gave me some serious creeps. Usually the ghost encounters I've had haven't really scared me, but that place really scared me. So like I said, I think that there's a huge difference between poltergeist activity, which could be caused by people who have passed on and they're just frustrated. And then there's hauntings like this. And so, yeah, and big difference.
Do you think that sort of, how do I want to put this? Do you think the act of something so violent could actually call negative entities into that space after that time has passed, after the event has already occurred? So, I mean, the person who's committed this atrocity is already drawing their own negative energy, and it's more than likely coming from them, and they're, let's say, sort of a black hole for that, and they're drawing that to themselves. Do you think that there are like ancient negative entities that would actually be attracted to those sort of things and perhaps join in that afterworld experience for those people that are still there and went through that?
I think so. What do you think, Ro?
I think it's a combination. I think that some of it is collective, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. I truly believe that. I mean, negative attracts negative. It just
definitely
does.
negative attracts negative. I'll agree with that, but I don't think that it's always that way. I think sometimes negative just is negative.
But I think that
Sure.
one of the things that
I could see it going both ways, honestly.
Yeah, I know that light workers, when they go into places that they've asked to clean the house, they're very positive people, and they try to maintain that positivity. And I think that what they're trying to do is offer up love to the entity that's in the house. I was talking to Heidi Hollis, who was the person who first coined the term Hat Man and Shadow People. And I was telling her about the shadow people in shadow person in our house. And she was like, oh, you know, because I was saying that I was acknowledging it. I mean, we got to the point where we were seeing it so often, you know, I would just go, hey, how's it going? And she goes, oh, don't ever do that, you know, because then you're just feeding it the energy it wants. And then, but then I was talking to somebody else, and she's more of a spiritual medium. And she said, no, absolutely not. Go ahead and talk to it. And, you know, send it love and send it light and tell it, if you want to go, feel free. We're not trapping you here, because she got the feeling that I was the one trapping the thing here, that I was keeping it in prison somehow. And she did a reading. Yeah, she did a reading on this. And so she said, next time you see it, just say, you know, if you feel that I'm imprisoning you, I'm not, you know, you can feel free to go. And so I did that once. And like we were saying, we haven't seen the shadow person in months. And it was right before that I did do that. And it seemed to me that, you know, maybe it worked, you know, but so I think if you send these entities, whether they're shadow people or Hat Man or ghosts or what have you, if you send it love vibrations, you know, you send out, you know, love and light toward the thing, it will probably not bother you anymore. You know, I mean, now there are some serious hauntings out there that something like that, something so simple as that is not going to work, but it couldn't hurt, you know.
Yeah, no, especially in the way of self-preservation, being in that sort of environment can be very draining, just being there. And you don't even have to be participating or acknowledging. When you walk into a place that has very heavy energy, I mean, you can feel it. And if you stay in there long enough, it just pulls it right out of you, makes you tired, you know? That's interesting that you are so sensitive to this. It makes sense to me why you'd be experiencing all of this throughout life, and why it's still a very lit light behind you in what you're doing, you know, today, currently. Where do you guys see yourself in the next 5 or 10 years with what you're doing with the shows?
Millionaires.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
yeah, right.
I don't know. Like I said, we've bounced around the idea of collaborating on a book together about all of our experiences. But that has really yet to take off. And but maybe eventually we'll get to that. And like I said, I don't know about you, but I'd love to go on some investigations. You know,
oh yeah, definitely.
maybe start out with going with a team, you know, an established team first. You know, but yeah, I think that would be great. I'd love to bring that to the YouTube channel. So yeah, I'm not sure. We are really just more into this as a hobby because we find it so interesting. So doing anything profitable with it, I don't know. You know, I mean, we did do some gear that you could order, you know, t-shirts and that kind of thing for a little bit. And that didn't last long. You know, we're not in this to make money necessarily. We're in it just because we enjoy the topics and we like bringing it to people, you know.
Yeah, it's fun to come up with.
Absolutely. I mean,
I was just going to say it's fun to come up with a topic and then go ahead and look at it and see what you get. Definitely, that's the fun of it.
You know, and like we were mentioning earlier, that we do fall down rabbit holes when we're researching this stuff, and it's very easy to do. And I know there have been times when both Ralph and I have had to stop each other and go, you know, the show on YouTube is only going to be about a half an hour long. We may as well just cherry pick it, you know, and just get what we need out of it. But even then, we'll continue to research it and find some fascinating stuff, you know, about whatever the topic is, you know.
Well, that's the most beautiful thing about what we do. Not only are we going to help educate other people on these subjects, but in the research, we're nurturing our own curiosity and intellect for these subjects. And yeah, I get a lot out of it as well. I love the research, but yeah, you're right. Once you get into a topic and then it branches out here and then over here and then over there, next thing you know, you don't even know where the hell you are anymore. And that's when I start bookmarking stuff, come back, start again. But yeah, I guarantee half you're going to find yourself off on a different rabbit hole. But you know, that's so fascinating. You know, the way you gentlemen have come together and the partnership that you share in doing what you do. So I'll ask you one more question here, and we'll wrap up. We're getting close to the bottom of the hour, and we're gonna finish that off. But what I'd like to know, out of everywhere you've been in your lives, okay, what's the most haunted and active location you've ever visited or lived?
Ralph?
Ooh. Well, lived would be the house that we were talking about with all the lady in white and all that stuff. But been, I would say probably Pompeii.
Oh, really?
That's, I mean, you talk about feeling the presence of ghosts and stuff like that there. It's very, very surrealistic that it actually happened. So I would say there.
As far as where I've lived, I would have to say probably that house I was telling you about in Bloomington, Minnesota. That was the most active haunted place that I've lived. It's very strange. You know, I lived in New Orleans for a long time, and
oh wow,
they say that it is one of the most haunted cities in America. And I never once experienced anything there. I mean, there was one incident that was very strange, but it wasn't a ghost experience. It was actually with vampire. It had something to do with a vampire. A friend of mine, my roommate at the time, and I were walking down Burgundy Street in the Quarter, and we were just idly chatting, and we were talking about Anne Rice's interview with a vampire and how she couldn't have picked a better city to base that story in. And I said it almost makes you really believe in vampires. And he goes, I don't believe in vampires.
Yeah.
And we trailed off another subject. We trailed off onto another subject, and we turned down Orleans Street and to go down to Bourbon. And we worked at this bar there. It was called it's still there. It's called the Tropical Isle. We both worked there. And so we were just going to go there for a visit. And as we got onto Bourbon Street, this woman, I should say young woman, she looked like she was like maybe 22, but she was dressed all in white. And she had this long white hair. And it seemed to me that the street was crowded, but she just came up through them, all these people, and just basically floated through them and floated right up to my friend Chuck. And she just looked at him and she says, "You better believe." And he was stunned. And I looked at him. I'm like, what the hell? And then she just left right between us. It was really weird. Yeah. But I mean, aside from that, I never experienced anything weird in New Orleans. And I lived in the Quarter where so many of these hauntings purportedly happen. But I never experienced anything there. But yeah.
That's very curious, man. That's very curious. Well, I want to thank both of you guys for coming on tonight. This has been awesome. I had a great time talking with you. I hope you had a good time as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. And yeah, like I said, you're going to be on our podcast, Paranormal News Network, this coming week, and I'm really looking forward to delving into your own investigations and all that. So yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Oh, my pleasure, Damian and Ralph. And I very much do look forward to doing your show. Out of curiosity, is that tomorrow or is that next week?
We will be uploading it next Wednesday, but it's tomorrow that we'll be recording with you.
Okay. Just wanted to double check. I had a feeling it was, but the way we're talking, just wanted to get some clarity there. All right, cool. So guys, just so you know, you can go and check out Damian and Ralph's work over at Black Lotus Productions on YouTube, Paranormal News Network podcast, and they have, Am I missing one? I'm missing one, right? You have the discussion group, but
yeah, and then we have
that was it?
The Black Lotus discussion group at Facebook. Yeah. And great thing about that group
Thank you.
is we don't have trolls there. You know, a lot of these paranormal groups have some serious trolls there
and they post a lot of stuff that's not related.
yeah, I mean, silly memes
Mhm.
and stuff like that. And we don't do that. We actually have discussions there about this stuff. So yeah.
So please, guys, go and check out what they're doing on Facebook in the Black Lotus discussion group. Check out their show and their new interview show they have over on YouTube as well. You won't be disappointed. I did watch some of their episodes, and they're fun, man. They're really good. I really enjoyed listening to the guests, and they asked some very great questions when it comes to exploring certain topics as they go through the conversation. All right, guys, thanks once again. What I'll do here is I'll bring you off camera for a moment. If you want to for just a moment, I'll be able to say my proper goodbyes off camera. If I say off camera again, it's just going to sound even more redundant. That being said, thank you once again, and I will talk in just a moment. Thank you, guys. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I saw you all in the chat. Sorry I couldn't get to every question that was posted, but I did do my best this evening. I hope you had a good time. I hope you did. This is great. This much fun. I had a great time talking to these two hosts, and they do know what they're talking about, and they have had their experiences. And like myself, they're covering the entirety of the field. And I think that's quite the undertaking because, God, just one of the branches of these subjects can be very overwhelming. But you know, it's all connected one way, shape, or form. And maybe one day we'll figure it out, if not collectively, individually. And sometimes that's enough. You know what I mean? Thanks, guys, for joining us. I will be back next week. Just keep your eye out to see what gets posted in terms of who's coming on. I won't mention any names as of yet. But that being said, keep your eye out. Go check out GUFON at GUFON's, God, I want to say radio stream, but I can't say it. It's just GUFON. Check out Richie G tonight. He'll be there at 10 o'clock Eastern time and 7 o'clock Pacific. So check him out this evening. And again, thank you everyone for being here tonight. Glad the feed was a little bit smoother. I know we've been having some issues since the election with the live shows. So we made it through once again. And thank you for being here. If you'd like to donate to Dark Hour Paranormal, there is a link to a PayPal donate. Jesus, there is a link to donate through PayPal in the comments, as well as both of the channels that you can find from my guests this evening. So go and check them out, like and subscribe. It really does help the channel, guys. It really does. All right, let's get you going here. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening. And if I can see anything in the dark, which I can't even with glasses, hey, get this up and running. Once again, guys, thank you so much for joining this evening, and we will see you soon. And cheerio. Thank you again, everyone. The Breaking Bad of ufology, huh?